Good morning and happy Tuesday. It is a gorgeous Tuesday here, and we are going to be talking about some pretty cool topics today on Mizzou Daily. Going to start things off by maybe another chance a Mizzou Tiger goes in the first round. Of course, had our man Membu last year, Darius Robinson the year before. Also going to be taking a look at some of the competitive spirit in the Tigers spring ball, what that QB competition is looking like. And we're also going to be talking about the defensive tackle situation for Mizzou. Definitely one that's the weaker point for the Tigers. Something that they'll be looking to probably address in spring ball, kind of seeing who's the best fit for that position. And we're going to cap things off talking about Brett Norfleet. So, first things first, another first round pick. If it's going to be someone, it'll probably be Zion Young, who, of course, had 6.5 sacks this past season, forced 2 fumbles, 6'5, 262, kind of that prototypical kind of defensive end size and rushing ability. Of course, had 20 solo tackles this year, 42 of them together. It was 2 years at Mizzou after 2 years at Michigan State, 16 and a half tackles for loss. So pretty strong campaign for him. Of course, those other first rounders that I just mentioned. Our man Membu was drafted 7th overall by the New York Jets last year. Probably one of the bright spots of that team altogether. You know, the Jets have had a pretty tough run of years, I guess you could say. But Membu was one of the brighter spots for them this past season. Pretty strongly rated on PFF as well. 90.4 in college, which ranked nationally among Power 4 offensive tackles at number 3. And then, of course, he was a 2024 All-SEC team selection. Second team in 2024. Played over 2,000 snaps for the Tigers. But in his first year with the Jets, a little over 1,000 snaps. Pressure rate was 5.3%, which is 8th best among NFL tackles. So he played in all 17 games. Pretty strong there for Membu for the Jets in his first year. Like to see him grow as a player. Like to see what the Jets kind of do with this quarterback room, what that's going to look like. Because, you know, for offensive linemen, it's kind of about who you're protecting. Got to get those sets right and all that kind of good stuff. And who's going to be the running back next year? So there's a lot of questions about the Jets, and especially with Membu being a cornerstone of this offensive line now, who they're going to put behind him at quarterback and running back. And then, of course, in 2024, it was Darius Robinson, who was the first-round pick for Mizzou, drafted 27th overall, and he had 43 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 14 of those tackles coming for loss. In his graduate year in 2023, also had 5 quarterback hurries. And his first 2 years in the NFL haven't really jumped off the page, you could say. His rookie year in 2024, he only played in 6 games, didn't start any, had only 10 tackles on the year. But this past season, come a little bit more, started 12 games, recovered a fumble, had a sack, 43 tackles with 4 tackles for loss, 15 of those solo tackles. So coming on a little bit for the Cardinals this past season, but the Cardinals are a bit of an interesting team as well. They're kind of struggling. You don't really know what the quarterback situation is going to look like for them. That's definitely something you always look at in terms of a football team is, you know, who's the quarterback, what the situation looks like. So for Darius Robinson in Arizona, you don't really know what's going to happen there. But definitely not the greatest 2 first years to start things off, but you definitely expect him to grow on that. I mean, you already see the growth from the rookie to the second year, second to the third year, and of course, it's the contract year, and so you want to get some big money, you want to be able to perform, get that extension, maybe go elsewhere and explore the free agent market. So big for Darius Robinson there. We'll kind of see what that looks like for him after this season. And then, so we're going to switch things up a little bit. You know, spring ball's in full swing. Second media portion is going to be on Tuesday. We'll talk about that later this week about what comes out of it. But the quarterbacks are going to be competing until September. We talked a little about this. We're going to dive a little bit more in depth. So we were looking at what Coach Drinkwitz had said in the press conferences last Thursday, and he basically said, we're excited about the quarterback competition that we're going to have. Our guys are going to compete, and they're going to compete for a while. So, in my head, that kind of reeks of what happened last year, where it was Sam Horn and Bo Prabula up until week 1 when they played Central Arkansas. Probably wouldn't like to see that again. You in an ideal world, you know who your starter is going into the first game of the season, especially because the second game of the season is against Kansas. You don't really want to have any question marks going into the first game, and you only got a little bit extra days to prepare, of course, because they're playing on Thursday, but a couple extra days to prepare going into that big rivalry game against Kansas. In my head, like we said, it's going to be Austin Simmons, but he was pretty strong at Ole Miss. The lefty thing is a little bit different. Coach Drinkwitz kind of said that he's a very competitive guy, natural talent, ability to run, but he hasn't played a ton of football, which is a true statement to say the least. Matt Zollers has played more football than Austin Simmons. And Austin Simmons is he's a young guy, but he's going into his third year of college football, and you could argue that Zollers has played more football just by starting a couple games. Started the A&M game, wasn't a great look. Started the Mississippi State game, a lot better there, and started the bowl game, which obviously wasn't fantastic. But true freshman, he's kind of looks like a statue in the pocket, Zollers does. And then there's going to be a little bit more competition there, but you definitely expect it. It's going to be between Austin Simmons and Matt Zollers. So it's a little bit different because Simmons is a lefty, Zollers is a righty. When you have a lefty quarterback, the playbook kind of flips, where the wide receivers are lined up, where the tight ends are lined up. It's all a little bit different. So it's not as easy to decide who's going to be your quarterback in September when one's a lefty and one's a righty, because you got to think they're installed. I mean, they're installing plays early. Like, they're installing plays in August, and you kind of got to have a rough idea of, okay, this guy's a lefty. Our right tackle is going to be Josh Atkins because he's protected his blind side. Oh, we're going with a lefty. Josh Atkins is a right tackle. We're going with a righty. Josh Atkins is a left tackle. That's, of course, you don't know what's going to happen, but there's a lot more to figure out when one quarterback's a lefty, one quarterback's a righty. But the competition's going to go, and it's going to go strong. Something really interesting of note is that Garrett Riley and Chip Lindsey, of course, we talked about Garrett Riley, who was the offensive coordinator at Clemson, came over to be the quarterback's coach, and Chip Lindsey, who was the offensive coordinator at Michigan, has been hired as the offensive coordinator at Mizzou. They're going to work hand in hand with these quarterbacks, saying that Drinkwitz kind of emphasized the point that they're not going to be put in negative spots. That's really, really strong for Mizzou. This past season, it was when they got behind the chains, they got in trouble, especially with the running game and Ahmad Hardy. So if they can stay ahead of the chains, this team can be special, man. If they can stay ahead of the chains and kind of do what you want them to do. I mean, it's early on, and I'm speaking as a guy who really hopes Mizzou's good, but you definitely got to think there's going to be special things if they're staying ahead of the chains. But going with something that might not be as special, there's a defensive tackle room. There's a lot of questions. Who's going to be playing D tackle? Of course, lost McClellan to the draft. He had a pretty strong performance that we talked about on it yesterday, but it's Marquise Gracial and Jalen Marshall are basically the two guys that have played meaningful snaps for Mizzou that are going to be able to play defensive tackle next year. And the meaningful transfer is Donta Simpson, who came in from Miami and has not played a ton of football for Miami. Played in 8 games, but only had 4 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hurry the entire season. Gracial's probably the most rounded out guy. Played in all 13 games, 16 tackles, 8 solo, 8 of them assists, and 2 tackles for losses. Also forced a fumble and had a pass breakup. So Gracial's definitely out of the defensive tackles that we know exist in terms of spring ball, Gracial's definitely the top guy. So you'd really, really like to see him, build on last season and what he did going into the season strong, top D tackle for Mizzou. But it's a guy who has not played like a ton of football. And that's the other thing is Jalen Marshall only had 1 start this year. It was at Vanderbilt. The entire season, he made 17 tackles, 4 of them solo with a sack, and 1 tackle for loss. So these are 2 guys that played in all 13 games, but weren't really starting that many games. And so it's going to be really interesting to look at what this defensive tackle room will look like in the future. It'll definitely, as spring ball rolls on, you'll kind of see what it ends up being. But then the other ones are Elias Williams and Sam Williams. Jason Dowell's a redshirt freshman. Taj Overton is a true freshman. So the least supplemented by newcomers for sure. Only that 1 transfer coming in for the defensive tackle. But they didn't really make any big portal splashes in the defensive tackle room. So question marks for sure. What's going to come of it, we don't know. But that remains to be found out. And that's what's exciting about spring ball. There's questions to answer. One big question that will not be answered, who's going to be the tight end 1 for the Missouri Tigers? Going to be Brett Norfleet. He is coming back. No, there wasn't really much of a question about him not coming back, but he'll be a senior. Probably have 1 more year of eligibility just due to the way the eligibility works nowadays. But he started 10 games, missed the game against A&M, was pretty banged up the whole season. Actually had a separated shoulder that he suffered against Vandy. And the reason that he missed the bowl game against Virginia was he got surgery on that shoulder heading into the offseason. So he's been participating in spring camp, was seen firing up the team in a couple photos I've seen on Twitter and online. Last season, he led Mizzou in touchdowns with 5 of them at 31 catches for 254 yards on the year. Third, and so pretty strong for him, but I mean, leading the team in touchdowns is pretty nice. He caught double more than anyone else did. He's a big red zone threat, pretty big guy, and he's got 10 receiving touchdowns, which are 5th most by a tight end in Mizzou history. Might remember some other former cool Mizzou tight ends. Alpert Ogwebunam comes to mind. Big Albert O. And Brett Norfleet, also a pretty strong blocking tight end. Big piece for Mizzou, having him back. Probably going to see him a lot more in the passing game this year. It's Alubade and Caden Lee in terms of wide receivers. We're talking about the wide receiver room. Include Brett Norfleet in there a little bit because he's a pass catcher. We're going pass catcher room. Brett Norfleet's in there. So that's why we talked about him there. But definitely going to be the tight end one for the Tigers. Excited to see what hopefully is a fully healthy Brett Norfleet season will look like. But the guy loves to get himself kind of hit, and he loves to get himself in the mix. Can't blame a tight end for doing that, but hopefully he stays healthy this year, and we'll have a lot more on spring ball and what's to come in the coming days. So thank you so much for tuning in.